All right, hello everybody. We'll go ahead and get started with this course. So welcome to the Cultivating Cannabis at Home 101 course, which is a 3-class course, 2 hours each every Monday for the next 3 weeks. We have lots of great presentations and Q&A sessions and troubleshooting and things like that. But this course is sponsored by the DUG Network, the DC Urban Ag Network. And that is, I'm one of the co-founders, Josh Singer. So we founded this, it's an all volunteer cooperative that we founded almost a decade ago, mainly because I work in the urban ag and food justice world in DC, and there's so many amazing things happening. And so many great resources and grants and job opportunities and all that stuff, but everyone's like operating in little silos, and it's so hard to hear about all this stuff. And many people don't, who could really benefit from these resources, don't ever actually hear about it. So we started this, the DUG Network, with two kind of focal points. One is we created a website that's got like, hundreds and hundreds of amazing resources in urban ag and food security and food justice and sustainability. So it's all categorized. So if you're looking for a place to buy compost or to compost yourself, or if you're looking for youth, gardening programs, or if you're looking for, to hire landscapers, all that stuff. It's just hundreds of different things that you would need. And in addition to that, we do every 2 weeks, we do this very long and ugly, but very resourceful newsletter that is free to sign up for. If you're not on it, I definitely urge you, because it has hundreds of job opportunities, of grants, of workshops and programs, and food justice causes, petitions and things that are happening in the food justice world, gardening tips, all different kinds of things every 2 weeks. It's it's full of a lot of great information. So if you're not on the newsletter, definitely check it out. All these resources we focus on, urban ag, food justice, food security, sustainability, all the different things, different areas right now that we try to promote. So definitely check it out. And so we are all volunteer network, so we don't pay anyone, but we do have some admin costs, like our MailChimp for our newsletter and WordPress website hosting stuff. So we have a couple sponsors that help us out with that. Really amazing organizations like Love and Carrots. If you're ever looking to install a garden somewhere, or at your house, definitely they're fantastic. They're like an edible landscaping business. Compost Cab, if you ever need to, if you want to, to start composting your food scraps and things like that. They have pickup services, and Tacoma Food Co-op, which is a worker-owned co-op in Tacoma. It's amazing food at amazing prices, and it's just such a great place to shop. So we try to have really great sponsors. We try to align our values with them, and but we actually we've actually saved away a little bit of money. So we want, we're covering our costs, and we're saving a little bit extra. So we want to take every year, we try to take whatever extra we have and basically find what we see that's missing in programming and resources around the city, and we try to host it. So that's one reason why we're sponsoring this today, this growing cannabis course, because recently, cannabis is now legal in DC. You can grow a bunch of plants in your basement, or you can get a medical card and go to dispensary, which is amazing. But at the same time, it's also it's not completely accessible, especially for people living in poverty, because it is expensive for sure. And there's a lot of other reasons too why just having more control over quality control and things like that, that we're going to talk about in the class. There's a lot of different reasons why you would want to actually grow your own cannabis. So we wanted to put this class together. We've been waiting for a whole while, looking for the right teacher. We met Sebi not too long ago, and he wrote up as a curriculum for the 3-day class, and it's going to be exciting. It's a very thorough class with a lot of experience going into the teaching of it. So we're really excited to get this started. Thank you all so much. If anyone ever wants to hear more about the DUG Network, we're always looking for people to help. And if you're into like writing newsletters or helping us with web development, or just trying to capture more resources, or if you have things that you want to help, promote, if you got a garden and you're doing an event, we have, over a 10,000 person email listserv. So we, definitely let us, reach out to us, and we'll definitely for free help promote all those things. things. Yeah, for sure, reach out anytime. But yeah, I think we'll go ahead and get started with this class. Really excited to get started. Thank you all so much for joining. And yeah, we'll hand it over to the teacher now.
Really a good to get some of this information out there. Growing cannabis, something I like to say is it's easy to grow weed. It's hard to grow good weed. So I think everybody here is totally capable of doing it. How far you want to take it, how good you want to get, you know, how much you want to obsess about quality and optimize your setup. That's all sort of on you. Certainly it's something where, you know, effort translates into quality. But everybody should be able to execute at least a solid grow. You know, notwithstanding catastrophic failures, if you really, you know, kind of care about it and kind of pay attention to a few core principles, you should be able to get it. Another thing I wanted to say about my style and my approach to this is I'm sharing like super fundamental basics. I don't have like, this is the one foolproof method. This is the silver bullet. This is the perfect product that's going to make you grow the best weed ever. Like there's a lot of that online right now. And usually it's connected to people trying to sell you things, whether they're trying to sell you products or equipment, or they're trying to sell you their services as a consultant. There's a lot of these magic bullets, but I'm not taking that approach at all. In fact, if you're someone who has been taking Josh's classes and you're part of the Doug network, if you're someone who knows how to grow a tomato, you're probably like in the top 10th percentile of weed growers, because most people grow weed because they're stoners and they want free weed. And that's not a good way to approach it. You should be a gardener who smokes sometimes. That's probably a better approach. But yeah, I mean, it's not a very mysterious plant. There's a few basic principles that are really helpful to understand. Most of the principles that I'm going to be talking about, you could apply to any plant. You know, you can grow chilies, you know, using this setup that I'm about to give you. So part of this class is going to be just basic indoor horticulture. How do you grow a plant inside, potentially out of season? It's not easy. So just remember, when I'm going over a lot of things, it's not necessarily specific to this is how you grow weed. It's just, this is how you grow. This is how you grow anything inside. That's not like a house plant that you can like throw in the corner. And I am going to be taking frequent breaks for questions. I put together a terrible PowerPoint. It's really bad. It's mostly just for me to organize my thoughts. For visuals, I am going to be relying on a few like props I brought, including a live weed plant. So, you know, I'm just going to try to be as physical as possible with this class, and try to keep you engaged through talking. But next time I will try to have a more interesting PowerPoint for you. I'm going to pull up my screen share here. Okay, cool. The setup. Let me get into a presentation. So today is about the setup. I broke down this curriculum into 3 parts: the setup, the grow, the harvest. Usually these are like the big steps. You know, for someone who's getting started for the first time, the setup, you're going to find it to be a little bit challenging, and we'll go into a little bit why. But once you get set up and once you know, start moving and cracking in your grow, you will have that set up and you won't have to rebuild it. You will have to clean, but you won't have to rebuild it. So just starting a little bit on cannabis basics, because, you know, I know we're all coming from different places and, you know, might have a lot of experience with the plant, might not have that much experience with the plant. You know, there's been a lot of PhDs and doctoral theses about weed, its history, its pharmacological uses, everything. So, you know, anything I'm talking about here, you can go and read about it probably for like 1,000 years and you still wouldn't get through all the information out there. So this is just super high level. A little bit of the history. Cannabis is from Asia, found in Himalayan regions in what is now, you know, Tibet, China, India. It's been used medicinally throughout the world, in every place that it's landed. And it has a very unique connection with humans because it interacts with a system that we all have called the endocannabinoid system. The endocannabinoid system is not very well understood. It was actually discovered while people were researching cannabis, and they noticed this entire hormonal system in our body that it was interacting with that we didn't even know about. Basically, the long and short of it is the endocannabinoid system interacts with every other system in the body, and it's mostly responsible for regulation and stasis. So, you know, the moderation of things, the stability of things, the ability of your cells to retain their integrity. And that's where like anti-inflammation comes in. A lot of things are connected to the endocannabinoid system, which cannabis interacts with. That's the basis of a lot of its medicine. So throughout history, people have used it to, you know, address pain, inflammation, anxiety, insomnia. It's been shown to have anti-cancer properties. It's been shown to have neuroprotective properties. It's not very well understood. People just know it works. Another thing to mention about cannabis medicine is in every study that's ever been done about cannabis, ever since the research, medical research around cannabis was allowed, has showed us that the whole plant actually has the greatest benefits to patients, regardless of what condition they have. So whether that's glaucoma or cancer or chronic pain, patients always had better outcomes using the whole plant product. So like the actual flower. There are processes that exist to concentrate and distill the quote unquote active ingredients, but those concentrates and those distillates and those isolates have all been shown to be less effective than the whole plant. There's a lot of speculation as to why. A lot of people point to the fact that the cannabis plant has a lot of different compounds that are beneficial, not just THC, which is the famous one that gets you high, as well as terpenes, which are volatile oils that are responsible for the unique smell and flavors associated with cannabis. So the entourage effect is sort of the principle that the whole plant, when it works together, the terpenes, the cannabinoids, and the other compounds in there have a greater effect on your for patient outcomes than just plain THC or plain CBD in isolation. Which brings me to the second thing here is hemp. This picture here is Winona LaDuke. For those who don't know, she's an incredible Native American activist who's definitely an inspiration to me and to a lot of people around the world. She's her current venture, Winona's Hemp, is a tribally run hemp company based in Minnesota. And I think she's really unique because a lot of people are farming in the US are farming hemp to extract and sell CBD, which is a non-psychoactive compound that has a ton of medical benefits, particularly sleep, pain, and inflammation. And a lot of people are growing for CBD because CBD, you know, has like the highest markup of all the products you can get out of hemp. But Winona's cool because she's actually innovating techniques to grow hemp for fiber, for seed. She's bringing her tribal community into that process, and her approach is really different than a lot of the hyper-capitalist approaches around hemp and cannabis. So she's someone who's I really follow around the holistic use of the medicine, using all parts of the plant and viewing it as something that's not just its flowers, it's also fiber, it's also seed, food, it's also root. So definitely recommend looking into her and learning a little bit more about her work as far as hemp. Other than producing CBD, hemp has historically been an industrial material. The word canvas, which, you know, many of you know that word canvas, referring to what's used to make sails or what people paint on. The reason it's called the canvas is because canvas is the Dutch word for cannabis. So traditionally, anything that we now think about as canvas was originally made out of hemp, which it was literally called cannabis. So, you know, cannabis is lurking throughout history in all these places that you would never expect. The Declaration of Independence was written on hemp paper. The ink they used, fun fact, I don't know if you know this, Josh, as like a DC gardener, but it was actually ink made from pokeweed berries. So it was these two very like indigenous kind of old school plants. It was not written on, you know, pen and paper like we assume. It's pokeweed berries and hemp. So history, I could just like rant forever about history. There's so much. We have to address the criminalization, of course. Cannabis was used as an industrial cash crop, as well as a medicine and sacrament to many cultures for many years. It has only been criminalized for less than 100 years. So think about thousands of years of human history. We've been using this plant in a bunch of different ways, and including smoking it for fun for thousands of years. And then less than a century, it's been illegal. So what's happening now with legalization is not this new progressive thing. I'm sure there's some people on this call whose grandparents or great-grandparents were growing it back in the day. So it's really sort of like a reemergence of something that was already there. Criminalization has, of course, like devastated communities of color, devastated rural economies across the global South. It's something that is, you know, completely artificial and actually unprecedented in history. Criminalization of cannabis worldwide actually followed the US criminalization of cannabis. So this is really part of US imperialism and imposition on other countries, even countries that have held it very dear to their culture for many years, including India, you know, which is, you know, sort of its homeland, where it's been a part of Ayurvedic medicine for thousands of years. So you can criminalize it, but you can't erase it. So that's why, you know, it's evolved a lot because of criminalization, but it's never gone away, even in the most repressive cultures and settings. When we talk about the era of prohibition in cannabis, it's affected the plant morphologically. People say, you know, you have weed that comes from Pakistan and weed that came from Afghanistan, and now you have weed that comes from closet stan, and it's basically saying that people have bred weed to be able to grow in a closet. So it's like that's its new indigenous homeland, closet stan. So the plant has adapted. We've adapted around criminalization for better and for worse. I'm going to talk more about that. The last thing I'll talk about here is chemotypes. Chemotype type 1, type 2, and type 3. Type 1 cannabis is what you probably know of and think of as weed. That's high THC, low CBD. Type 3 is what you would call hemp. So that is high CBD, low THC. And type 2 is really cool. It's like 50-50 or some gradient in between. And that you're seeing more in medical dispensaries, but it's a really important product that I think a lot of people would benefit from if they had more access to it. So in this class, we're going to be talking about type 1 cannabis. And the reason I'm calling it type 1 cannabis is to differentiate it from hemp, which is type 3 cannabis, but it's the same exact species, Cannabis sativa. It's the same thing. Even indica is still Cannabis sativa, var indica. It's all Cannabis sativa. You're not going to hear me call it, you might hear me call it weed for fun, but you're not going to hear me call it marijuana. You're not going to, and there's a reason for that. Marijuana was a term that was invented during the early criminalization and prohibition of cannabis. They started calling it that to drive home the association between the cannabis plant and Mexican immigrants who were bringing seeds and bringing cannabis flowers from Mexico, where it had a long history of medical use, and they were planting it in the US and distributing it and selling it in the US. And so, you know, they wanted to take advantage of the xenophobia and racism of the time and give it a Spanish name, it's a Mexican slang name, in order to further other it and criminalize it. Because they knew if they called it hemp, everyone and their grandpa would be like, well, hemp's fine, nothing wrong with hemp. So you won't call it marijuana. You should definitely get out of the habit of calling it marijuana if you're calling it that now. I'll probably correct you if you say marijuana, but I won't correct you if you say weed, gas, fire, bud, flower. Those are all great words. So where is we in the intersection of all this history and culture and racism and biology and continents? Well, we're the home grower, or we're the home growers, or we're the aspiring home growers. And I don't need to convince you why you should grow at home because you're already here, but it's certainly worth driving home some of those points. We're going to talk about cannabis in the context of legacy, medical, and recreational. Legacy is what people call illegal weed or black market. I don't like those words because I think, how can a plant be illegal? And it's problematic to call something from the black market when the black market is actually in DC and many cities across the world driven by Black people. So we're not going to give that a bad name there. We're just going to call it the legacy market, which means the market and the product, the cannabis products that everyone has been smoking for the past 100 years, which is still the majority of cannabis produced, consumed, and sold. So it's the legacy market, means not regulated by the government, not sanctioned in any way. The legacy market, also calling it that, also puts some respect on those people who came before the legal growers, the home growers, the commercial and medical growers, because it was actually people who were suffered and sacrificed a lot in order to breed these cannabis varieties, keep them alive, get medicine to patients, when there was no such thing as medical cards. So we're going to put some respect on our legacy growers and not call them illegal growers, and we're not going to call them black market growers. The medical system, you might have seen dispensaries around DC. These are all part of the licensed medical system. These are very, very strict operations, mostly run by multi-state operators, so large pharmaceutical companies. They are usually, only accessible to people who have a medical card, which you have to be prescribed by a doctor. Very tightly regulated and very expensive. Medical system also has some problems because almost all of, or I'm sure that all medical cannabis grown in DC at least is synthetically grown. So there are some products they use, both fertilizers and pesticides, which have been linked to negative health outcomes in consumers. There was recently a case of a girl using, like a young girl who had seizures using CBD sourced from a medical dispensary, and her having a very serious reaction to PBO, which is a pesticide that was sprayed on the plants in this, legal medical facility. So, nothing I'm going to show you here is going to use any chemicals that have any risks to human beings. I'm not saying you're going to die and get a seizure or something if you smoke dispensary weed. I'm just saying, just because it's called medical doesn't really mean it's better. Recreational is something we don't have in DC. Recreational cannabis is a licensed, regulated market for adult use. There's currently a bill with the DC Council to legalize recreational cannabis and open dispensaries that are available, open to anybody over 21 without a medical card, but that's kind of getting stalled out. There's been some new bullshit with Congress, so that might be getting stalled again. We grow at home for a few reasons. One of them is safety. When you're buying cannabis on the legacy market, or even, as I mentioned, on the medical market, you're interacting with synthetic pesticides. You're interacting with processing techniques that might increase the risk of interacting with mold or residual chemicals or cross-contamination from something else. You don't know where it's coming from. You don't know the impacts that cultivation had on the community that it's from. Was it, was there exploitative labor involved? Was there unsustainable growing practices involved? Did people get hurt in order for you to get that bag of weed? That's something that when you're in the legacy market, these are things that, as a result of prohibition, these are things that happen, and it might not be something you want to be a part of. Another reason to grow at home is you can choose what you want to grow, and you can smoke what you want to smoke. When you are choosing seeds, you can select strains that fit the flavors you like, that have the medical benefits that you might be looking for. And you can kind of plan on when it's coming, and you always have it. You grow a few ounces and you store them in a comfortable place. You don't need to be running out and spending $60 on an eighth of weed every 2 weeks or whatever. You can just reach into your stash. And then the other thing is, economic. Now, it's important to talk about grow economics. A lot of people have unrealistic expectations of how much they're going to be able to grow their first time. There's going to be an upfront investment in home growing, and you're not going to make that much money off of home growing. If that was in the back of your head, with the current legalization status of the legality of home growing, with only 3 to 6 mature plants at a time, that's not really an economically viable amount of cannabis. And by the time you grow it and trim it and process it and do everything, you're not going to make a meaningful amount of money off of it. I don't think that that's a really viable way to make money right now in DC. So definitely would just think about the benefits coming from you not buying cannabis elsewhere. People these days are paying between $40 and $60 an eighth, $200 an ounce. If you grow your own, you can definitely offset those costs. The cost of setting up, which can be anywhere from $100 to $400, will certainly yield you more than 2 ounces. A $400 grow setup could yield you, I would say 4 to 8 ounces in 4 to 6 months. So it definitely, that's money saved over the course of the year, however fast you get through that amount or quantities you want to share with your friends and family. Feel free to drop any questions in the chat, by the way. I will definitely keep an eye on that. Thank you so much for all the feedback. And I totally agree, DC should be a state. Gonna get there. So this is dope that it's awesome to see some feedback here. My mouse disappeared. Here we go. Initiative 71 is the referendum in DC that legalized cannabis. So we should go over these before you start growing, because it's really important. You're allowed to possess 2 ounces or less. You're allowed to use it on private property. You're allowed to transfer 1 ounce or less to another person, as long as there's no money, goods, or services exchanged. And then you're allowed to cultivate within your primary residence up to 6 plants, no more than 3 of which are mature. This is all pretty straightforward here. The one that we're going to concern ourselves with today is cultivation. You can cultivate within your primary residence, which means that's the place you actually live at, and that's on your driver's license, DC, up to 6 plants. You see there, they always call it marijuana because it's always in the context of criminalization. It's called marijuana. So you can see that really reflected here. No more than 3 of which are mature. Usually maturity would be considered a plant that is flowering. It's in its flowering stage as opposed to its vegetative stage, which is its immature stage. So the interpretation of this law would be that you can have 3 plants that are vegetative, which means they just have leaves, shoots and leaves, and 3 plants that are flowering, which means they have actual flowers on them. If you live in a household of 2 or more people, you can have up to 12 plants, 6 of which can be mature and 6 of which must be immature. If you have 3 people in your house, it doesn't mean you can have 18 plants. It means you can still only have 12. So if you live in a group house, it doesn't matter if there's 5 people there, you can still only grow 12 plants, 6 of which can be mature, 6 of which can be immature. Now, that's a good amount of plants, to be honest with you. I definitely, just on principle, don't really support the idea of like, oh, you can only grow these many plants in your house. It's like, it's your house. If you want to fill it up with plants, it's fine. You're still not going to make any money the way prices are right now. So I do think it's a little arbitrary, but that's the law. And I think, using that as a really good benchmark for your home grow, I think, especially for a beginner, I think honestly, 6 plants is more than enough to get started with, to pull a decent yield off of. So I think that's super reasonable. Another strategy here is, if you want to grow a lot of weed, you could just grow bigger plants. It's a very vigorous plant. It's very fast growing. If you know what you're doing and you get it into a big enough container, you can pull half a pound off of one plant inside. There are there are people that are pulling a pound off of a light, 3 pounds off of a light in some facilities. So you can definitely pull some good weight off of one plant. So I would not view this as an extremely limiting law here. The other like safety first thing we should probably do is some security vectors that you should think about. Kids obviously shouldn't be accessing any area that you're growing cannabis. I'm not worried about the kids, actually. I'm more worried about your plants. Kids will be fine, it's just a plant, but definitely plants can be fragile at various points, and can be very sensitive to changes in light. They can be sensitive to getting knocked over, especially when they have big juicy flowers on them that branches can break very easily. And of course, you don't want kids telling their friends, oh, my dad's growing weed or whatever. And next thing you know, a play date, ends badly, or parents get weird. So anyway, yeah, kids and cannabis, they just don't combine, so definitely make sure it's an area that is locked if you have kids, and out of sight. And, I definitely, every parent, can make their decisions about how much they want to normalize things. I know when I have kids, I'll want them to feel like it's not a bad thing or a weird thing. But, certainly helps to keep those things separate. Pets, I know you love your annoying ass dog, and I know like he's just friendly and he's so special and stuff, but I've seen a lot of grows get messed up by someone's dog or cat, just stomping through, eating leaves, breaking branches. Another thing to consider with pets is dandruff. If a pet is allowed to access an area where cannabis is being grown, particularly flowering cannabis, that dandruff, that hair will stick on those buds and will be reflected in the final product. And it's no fun to be, picking hair out of your weed. So definitely keep pets and animals away. They can also vector pests and disease, particularly mites. We'll talk more about mites in the next class, but you're going to want to do your best to keep the inside plants away from outside biologicals. Another thing is assholes. That's 10 times, 99 out of 100 times, it's not going to be police that, mess with your grow. It's going to be assholes. It's going to be someone noticed that, you have big bags of soil going in and out of your house. Someone noticed that you have a funny shaped or a funny colored light on at odd hours. And they're going to be looking for a quick buck and just rip you off, break into your house and steal your weed. I say that not to make anybody paranoid, but it's because it's happened to me, and it's happened to a lot of almost everyone I know who's been in the game for a little while. It just happens. And sometimes it's someone you know or someone you thought you knew, and it always just ends badly. The last thing is police. It's very, very unlikely that you're going to be subject to law enforcement in the context of a home grow. Certainly there are precautions you want to take to keep them from, getting too curious. But it seems very low on the priorities of the DC police these days. But that being said, if you're living in a neighborhood or in a community that's been historically subject to police violence, then it would, it's definitely worth taking precautions to avoid any excuse you could give them to harass you. So yes, sorry, just going over some I'm seeing some of the questions, and I will answer them shortly. No, there's no protection for folks with an ABRA license. Six plants total per adult in the household, up to 12. So it's only like one person can have 6, 2 people can have 12, 3 people can have 12, 4 people can have 12, 5 people can have 12. Doesn't matter how many people. If there's more than one person, the number is only 12. And then, yes, I will be talking about light, soil, grow media, seed availability, etc. Don't you worry, I'm getting to that. And my mouse just keeps disappearing. The organic method, just to start to pivot into talking about actual growing, I'm going to be talking mostly about growing organically. There's a lot of different ways to grow. Hydroponics, aeroponics, Coco choir, in-ground, light depth, hoop house. There's a lot of ways to grow. I'm going to mostly be focusing on growing organically indoors, what we would call soil growing, even though it's actually not soil, it's a grow medium. But we'll talk more about that later on. The reason to grow organically is that you're not interacting with any potentially harmful pesticides if you're using best practices. The quality and terpene profile, which is like the flavor and smell profile of organic cannabis, is generally regarded as better, and a lot of connoisseurs prefer organic. And then the ease and flexibility. Certain systems like hydroponic system requires a lot of maintenance and a lot of hardware and automation that can go wrong, and very sensitive to pH fluctuations in water, very reliant on buying external inputs. And the organic method is really kind of just feels like watering a plant in your house. It really feels a lot more true to the nature of the plant. And if you go away for a week, your neighbor can water your plant with regular water out of a watering can and not worry about like completely fucking you up. The other good thing about the organic method is that it's harder to burn your plants with nutrients. The nutrients are a lot more gentle. They're a lot safer to use, and there's no risk of there's a very low risk of actually like ruining your plants by feeding them, which is not true in synthetic grows. Okay, building your grow. A few very essential things you need. The first thing is water. What's your water access? What's the closest sink? What's the closest shower? What is the quality of that water? Depending on, the pipes in your house, your water might have certain contaminants in it. So it's certainly worth looking up. You don't really have to test your water in DC. Generally, we're okay. The main issues we have with water in DC are chlorine and pH. So I for that reason, I recommend a filtration system. So it can be very simple. There's some really, really cheap, readily available water filters out there. Definitely don't overthink it. Definitely don't buy anything marketed to cannabis people. You know, that's going to be like really expensive. You just buy a basic water filter that you can, you know, either, you know, put into your water line or put on the end of a hose. It's very, very easy to filter your water. And then pressure, you know, like if you have like this little tiny drippy sink, you know, just know that if you're growing a lot of plants, it's going to take you forever to like fill up a watering can. And, you know, if you have to go up and down stairs to like fill up a watering can. You know, think about the water pressure and the availability of water. The best case scenario is to have some kind of hose system, whether that is an attachment that you can get into your cold water line on your sink or toilet and redirect some water to water your plants, or if you have a good way to fill up a bucket, a 5-gallon bucket, that's usually the best way to approach water. So just think through, where's your water at, and what does it need. The other thing is climate control and ventilation. Cannabis is a hardy plant. It's adapted to a lot of environments, but there are some temperature ranges and humidity ranges that are optimal for its growth. So, you know, when you're picking a place in your house, just take a look, you know, where's your radiator? Where is your vent, your heat vent? Is that, you know, is it next to a window that's not insulated well? Is there a draft? Just pay attention to the ambient environment of the room you're growing in. It's for that reason also I don't recommend growing in a garage or a shed, because those can fluctuate very wildly based on the outside temperature. A great place to grow is a basement, because a basement is insulated by the earth, and so you have a very regulated temperature. The questions about rainwater is the absolute shit. Like, rainwater is the absolute best. If you have a rain barrel, you're so blessed. Like, if you have the opportunity to source rainwater, that is absolutely the first choice 100% of the time. Yeah, just like, end of story. Tap water is DC tap water works. Even after filtration, something you'll run into with tap water is a high pH. DC tap water usually tests around 8. Cannabis likes it down between 6 and 7. You know, we'll go over it in the next class, but, you know, if you're using DC tap water, definitely consider, you know, having something on hand to adjust the pH down. So temperature and humidity, very important. Generally, a good rule of thumb is if you're comfortable in a space, then the weed's going to be comfortable in a space. If you're in a space and it's like, damn, it's a little chilly in here, the weed's going to be a little chilly. If you're somewhere and it feels like really hot and stuffy, the weed's going to be hot and stuffy. Never put a cannabis plant in a place that you wouldn't lay down and like go to sleep every night. Basically, there's a few reasons for that. One of them is just because, you know, our intuition is very good. The other thing is that we have a connection with the cannabis plant that goes back for thousands of years. We've been breeding and selecting cannabis to accompany us wherever we live or wherever we go. So cannabis plants have been selected to grow at optimal rates in environments where humans also are, because those are the environments where cannabis is. So we have a very good relationship with that plant that goes back many years. And a lot of times your intuition is very good because of its evolutionary path, because its evolutionary path is very close to ours, because we've been its steward and we've been her biggest fan since day one. A good temperature range, and this is like generally because it will fluctuate based on the stage of growth, but you know, 75 to 80 degrees is awesome for cannabis. Like, you know, like 78 just feels like is like this really nice sweet spot. You will get there from room temperature with the light. So if your house is like 72 degrees and you have a light on, the plant's going to be like in a sweet spot. So just like putting it somewhere that's just already comfortable, already room temperature, when that light goes on there, it's going to get up around that 75, 80 and going to be super happy. A good humidity range early on, you know, when it's young is high, you know, you're going to want it around, you know, 60, 70% even. But yeah, 60% is a really good place for it to be. So a little more humid maybe than your house would be, especially in the winter. So consider a humidifier. But once the plant gets strong enough and starts like really working, the plant will actually, you know, release humidity through its leaves, and that will raise the ambient humidity of its grow environment. So the plant itself, just from you watering it, eventually, if the plant's like working and like doing great, then it'll sort of correct itself humidity wise. The other thing is ventilation. The plant needs, part of photosynthesis is it takes in CO2, it like eats the C and it releases the O2. So it needs to have a fresh supply of CO2. So you want to ventilate your grow environment in order to allow fresh air to come in, and then the old air to go out. And the best way to do that is to set up a system where the environment is intaking air from your house or whatever, and it's exhausting it outside, like outside of a window. You can use citric acid to adjust pH, but phosphoric acid is preferable. The easiest thing is to just buy a little pH down on, you know, Amazon or your local grocery store for like $8. But you can also use vinegar. Yeah, and citric acid does work. It's less stable. You know, there, like vinegar works too, but it's like if you use that to adjust your pH down, like it'll drift back up. Phosphoric acid is like industry standard. I'm going to hurry up. I appreciate everybody for bearing with me. This is like my first Doug class, so I hope I'm like keeping a good pace and a good energy. These plants are sensitive to light. We're going to talk more about that. In the flowering stage, they're going to require 12 hours of light and not 1 minute more. So you're going to need to build an environment where you can ensure absolute darkness in the flowering stage. This is all just leading me to why everybody should be growing in a tent. So we're gonna get that next slide, but you know, when in your grow space, you need dark, and the dark needs to be dark for the flowering period to work. Vegetative is okay. You can kind of have it on a windowsill or in a corner or whatever, but it needs to be dark during the flowering. The other thing is budget. You can build a grow on a budget. You can also spend like $1 bajillion on your grow. And like, there's not always a clear association between people who spend more money on their grow and people who have better outcomes. I would say, you know, I've seen some mega budget grows that have been like grown some killer weed. And I have seen people spend, you know, thousands of dollars on their grow starting up and, you know, totally fuck it up. So, you know, there's some products that there's some things you absolutely need. There's some things that really, really help. And then there's some stuff that like might tweak you up or tweak you down, depending on if you have it and if you use it right. But, you know, definitely try to keep yourself on a budget before you buy something. Think about, do I really need this? Because sometimes, especially grow stores, and I love our local grow stores, but they get very obsessed with products. Like, this is the new product. This is the new thing that will make your weed grow better. And, you know, if you don't fully understand the science, you can kind of get ripped off sometimes. So to always keep the budget in mind. And then the other thing is your plant count, your grow schedule, and your yield goals. You know, what do you have a goal? How much do you want to grow? What's your schedule? You know, like by when do you want to be finished? You know, by when do you expect to be smoking? Basically, these things all interact with each other, because you can grow 6 little plants and, you know, have them in the vegetative stage for 4 weeks and then immediately flip them to flower. And you'll fill up your space with flowering cannabis in a short amount of time. On the other hand, you could have like one little plant and let it grow and let it grow and let it grow and let that one plant fill out the whole tent. And then you flower and you get this big ass plant that put off a lot of flower, but it took you a little bit longer. And, you know, you got the same amount of cannabis that you would have gotten off of 6 little plants. So it just depends on your schedule, where you're at with your plant count and how comfortable you feel with your plant count, and, you know, what kind of genetics you're working with. The last thing I'll say is building your outdoor grow. An outdoor grow can be as simple as a pot of soil, like on your like back porch, or it can be as involved as building a greenhouse and mixing soil and building garden beds and installing irrigation. It can be simple, it can be complicated. Outdoor, the most important thing for starting your outdoor in DC specifically is light. Where are you getting a full direct day of sunlight on your property? So start there. Everything else is easy. Everything else is like extra. If you have like a patch of your garden that always gets a ton of light all season, including in the fall when the sun doesn't dip too far below the trees, that's like 99% of growing outside in DC, because sun is so in such short supply because of all the trees and hills and buildings and stuff. So outdoor, start with the sun. The rest is easy. The rest is like growing a tomato, you know. Building your ideal grow environment. Oh yeah, and I am going to talk about purchasing seeds online. That's my last slide actually, and I'm getting to my last. I'm a couple slides away, so we're going to talk about seeds shortly. To get to the hardware, the things that you have to buy. I think you have to buy these. These are like the basic things that you have to buy in order to start growing inside. Hardware. A tent, a grow tent. Take a look on Google. They're a dime a dozen. They're all over the place. They're very easy to buy. They're very easy to assemble. They're very easy to clean. They're very easy to maintain. A grow tent is the #1 easiest way to grow cannabis inside. A lot of people have you know, ambitions about they're going to convert a room, or they're going to convert a closet, or I'm going to redo my basement, you know, or they're going to retrofit a wardrobe, or they're going to make a space bucket. And all of these things are like 10 times harder and like 10 times less effective at creating a good grow environment than a grow tent. A grow tent is just always going to be the easiest way to create an ideal grow environment inside. I'm not saying don't grow in a closet or a room, but it's going to be a lot more work, and you have the potential for more problems. A light. I had a question in the chat about lights. The best light that I can recommend for a beginner is I'm gonna get around to your questions, y'all. I'm sorry, these are really good questions, and that's why I'm trying to finish like now, because I want us to be able to talk for like an hour. Like I'm trying to use as much of our second hour as possible for Q&A, because I know that's like probably the easiest way to learn. The lights I recommend are LED lights. An LED light is usually a panel. It's a sort of a board with a bunch of diodes, like little tiny lights arranged in a grid pattern along that board. LED lights are excellent because they emit relatively little heat. They are extremely energy efficient, so you get more light for less power. They don't require additional ventilation or ducting. Traditionally, grow lights it's really past tense at this point. I don't think very few people are growing with these anymore, but they were like these big, 400, 600, 1,000 watt bulbs called high pressure sodium bulbs or metal halides. And those bulbs got so hot that you needed to install a separate ventilation system in order to just keep the bulb cool, so it didn't like explode or like make your plants like overheat. I've grown with that before, and I grew some like awesome bud with that stuff, but my power bill was crazy. My room was always hot, and I had to install like this extra HVAC thing. I definitely like, outside of like a mega like low budget illegal or like underground operation, I don't recommend those. People use them because they would take the bulbs out of streetlights, like, you know, the streetlights out there. They would like climb up them, break the glass, take the bulb, and like that was like the cheapest way to grow great weed. So anyway, we don't do that. Buy an LED light. My recommendations for LED lights is to look at lights that are called full spectrum. So a lot of the cheaper LED lights are pink, blue, purple, like they're colored. They call them blurples because they're blue and purple, but they're kind of pinkish, like really ugly. Like you have these, you know, and even still today, like a lot of the lower budget, like regular plant lights are that color. And they really are not that efficient. They're not as efficient. They don't produce the same spectrum of light that cannabis develops best under. And to be honest, there's so many good full spectrum lights on the market now that that it's really worth it to buy them. Another problem with those blurple lights is that they make it hard for you to see. So in order for you as a gardener to be responsive to your plant, you need to have a really good idea of what's going on. Like you need to really be able to inspect the leaf, see the color, see small details, potential nibbles from a pest. Like you need to really have a good like view on it. And those blurple lights really distort your ability to understand what's going on with your plant. So the full spectrum lights, which are just white lights, are definitely the best. I'm actually going to show you a few examples of these lights here in my house so that you can see what I'm talking about. The other thing is you need is fans. You're going to need two different kinds of fans. You're going to need an exhaust fan, which is a cylindrical fan that has the blades inside of it that you can duct tape onto a duct. That's what duct tape. I learned this when I started growing. Duct tape is called duct tape because you use it to tape things onto ducts. So this is the one time I've actually used duct tape for what it's for. You take this fan, you set it into there's a pre-cut hole in most grow tents where you can accommodate these fans. You put it in the hole where the exhaust fan goes, which is usually at the top, like on the right top corner. And then you tape it onto a duct, and then you take that duct and you angle it out of your house. That's the best way, is to just exhaust outside. I had a setup once where I exhausted to another room in the house because my house was cold and the exhaust air was warm. So I used it as like a way to heat my house. But that's like advanced techniques. It's best to just exhaust it out. So that's one kind of fan, is your exhaust fan. The other kind of fan is your oscillating fan. Your oscillating fan is responsible for moving the air around the grow environment. The reason you want air circulating and not just exhausting is because you want all of your plants to experience sort of a wind sensation. If there's no air circulation, the plants don't build any resistance to wind. So when the fan blows the plants, it stresses them out. They're like, oh my God, I got to get stronger. And so then the branches get strong. If you don't do that, they'll usually just grow and then flop over because they have no stress to train them to be stronger plants. Another reason you want a oscillating fan is to remove any potential climate pockets. So sometimes, you know, when you set up your grow, this corner will be hot and this corner will be cold, and, you know, because the exhaust passes through here, and, you know, the light is here, so this is hotter, and then, you know, this is next to the radiator. So there's a lot of little pocket microclimates that can form. If you have an oscillating fan, it eliminates those microclimates. So it makes sure that, you know, your little thermometer, hydrometer that's in there telling you the temperature and humidity of your grow, it makes sure that, you know, whatever you see on that little gauge is what's going on throughout the whole tent, because it's like a soup that's getting all mixed up. You want a watering system. There are different ways to do it. Obviously, the easiest way is a watering can. I would recommend getting a watering can that doesn't have like those little holes in them, like just a straight spout. A 2-gallon watering can with a straight spout is like the most easy, basic way to do it. Your other options, which other things I've done in the past that have had success, have been 5-gallon bucket. So if you're like strong and comfortable carrying around a 5-gallon bucket full of water, it is heavy as shit, but if you can do that, fill up your 5-gallon bucket full of water, bring it into your room. You can do your pH adjustment, mix your nutrients. We'll talk about that next class. And then you can feed out of that bucket. And the bucket is nice because you can just use like a like one of those quart like soup containers, like one of those deli cups. And it allows you to measure how much you're watering. So if you have a quart like Tupperware thing and you have your you know, your water, your nutrient solution, you can measure how much you're giving each plant. And it allows you to stay consistent with watering. It allows you to notice when you know how much water each plant is getting, you notice which ones are growing in certain ways. So we'll go more into it next time about watering like techniques, but watering is something that's very intuitive. People say, how much should I water my plant? I'm like, I can't tell you how many gallons you should be watering your plant every week. Like that's something that's really intuitive. We'll talk more about it next time. You can also install automated watering systems. I've done that before. I also, when I did that, had a leak and there was like water cascading down like into the basement. So like automated watering systems are great if they're really, really dialed in. If anything goes wrong, it's potentially catastrophic. So automated watering systems are a double-edged sword. And you know, the best way, like the professional way to do it would be to get a pump and you know, have a reservoir, whether that's your 5-gallon bucket or even like what I use is a 35-gallon trash can from Home Depot with a sump pump in it and a hose attached. And I just turn on the pump and then I water with like a hose, like with like the little shower attachment. And it allows me to water very quickly and water very precisely to make sure that all the soil gets saturated. But that's a little bit of more of a setup. But ever since I started doing that, it's certainly cut down on a lot of time and allowed me to feed and water my plants more comfortably. Another thing that everybody needs in their garden is a pump sprayer. It's just like a little spray thing that you like, it's like a 1 or 2 gallon like tank that you pump up and it's got a little sprayer and it like mists. That's good because it helps you with your integrated pest management. We're gonna talk next class about some very gentle organic pesticides you can use or that you should use. I mean, you need it, you have to do it. If you don't, you will definitely get pests that could really mess you up. So we'll talk about that. It's also good for watering like very small plants, like plants that are like in very small containers. You can water them with a pump sprayer. It's easier than like trying to water with a watering can. A seedling tray to start your seeds. And we'll talk about that when we get into our germination segment, as well as they usually come with these peat plugs, and those peat plugs are really good for starting cannabis seeds. And then containers. Containers, my recommendation is to get fabric pots rather than plastic pots. Plastic pots are great for the earlier stages of growth, but when you get to the final transplants, like when you're transplanting into the pot that you're going to finish the plant in, it's really good if that's a fabric container. Fabric containers are lightweight, they're durable. They prune the roots using air. It's called root pruning. So in a plastic pot, the roots will grow to the edge of the pot and then they'll start circling. So they lose their efficacy because they're like running over each other a lot. In a fabric pot, the roots will reach the edge of the pot and they'll grow into the fiber of the fabric until they interact with air. And then that will automatically terminate the growth of that root. And instead of like hooking down and swirling around, that root will then branch off and go in other directions and spread into more of the medium that it wouldn't have otherwise had access to if it were in a plastic pot going around in circles. So fabric pots are awesome. They're super cheap. You can get them at the grocery store, you can get them at Amazon. You can, like, when you're done, you can like wash them in the washing machine. Like, fabric pots are awesome. Definitely recommend a fabric pot. We're gonna talk about purchasing seeds online. It's not against the law to plant outside on your property. I'm gonna double check that for you. I've grown outside for many years. Most people I know grow outside very comfortably without many issues. My understanding of the law is that as long as they're out of public sight, so they can't be visible from the sidewalk or visible from any public street or way. So as long as they're protected and out of sight, then I believe that's within Initiative 71. I'm going to check the letter of the law for you, but that's just for practical purposes. That's where enforcement is at right now. Growing outside is the best, by the way. I grow outside. I'm teaching this because I think most people in DC are going to have to grow inside. But if you have an opportunity to grow outside, I would say, like, don't, like, fuck the tent, fuck everything. If you have a space to grow outside, grow outside. It's the best. It's awesome. It's so easy. The tents, so like there's Cadillac tents, Gorilla Tent is like a very good name brand. Sturdy zipper, good reflective inside, the fabric is thick, the poles are strong. Gorilla Tent is like the best one. There's another one called AC Infinity, is also like very high quality. To be honest, the cheapo Amazon tent, like, I'm sure it's not like technically as good, but I've never had a problem with them. I've grown in the Gorilla tents, and I've also grown in the cheapo Amazon tents, and I don't see a big enough difference to justify the cost difference. The main thing with tents is the zippers. That's the fail point always, is the zippers. So that's the good thing about the Gorilla tent, is the zipper is like strong and like well oiled, and like, like you can rip it open and close all day and it'll never break. The cheapo tents off of Amazon, those zippers get jammed sometimes. So if you're going to get a cheaper tent, just be gentle with the zipper. 6 to 8 hours of sunlight be sufficient to grow outside. 6 to 8 hours of direct sunlight. If they get indirect sunlight for the rest of the day, then that's good. If it's like 6 hours of light and then the rest of the day is just like pure shade, like behind a building, like if it's like a building shade, that's probably not, it's not great. But if it's like dappled shade because it's like the sun is, behind some trees or something, that's okay. I would say, yeah, 6 to 8 hours. If it's direct, like if it's real sun, it'll still grow. Yeah, so it's sufficient. If the question is if it's sufficient, it's sufficient. But try to find a sunnier place if that's the case. Grow tents do cut down on the fragrance in the air. These plants, especially when they're flowering, will be very, very, very smelly. Like, they'll be like, yeah, if you're doing it right, they will smell. There are some strains that you can choose that smell not as strong. The famous one is Northern Lights, which is why it was so popular during Prohibition, is because it was very potent but not very smelly. So that's why a lot of people grew Northern Lights. So there's some strains you can grow that aren't so smelly. The best way to cut down on fragrance in the air, like smell, is to make sure that your ventilation is good. So if you have that exhaust fan that I described, with a duct that goes out your window, that's going to take out like 95% of the smell. That's going to really help you. If you're worried about the smell on the other side of the exhaust, like if your window is for some horrible reason pointed like directly at a neighbor's property or whatever, and or at the street, and you're worried about it smelling, you can buy a carbon filter. These carbon filters are very easy to install and attach to a duct, and will remove most of the smell. So they're kind of expensive, kind of extra step, but if smell is a real concern, I would definitely recommend researching a carbon filter. Keep moving. Yeah, growing outside definitely poses a security issue. If your place isn't private, then it's more likely to get stolen if it's outside. That is true. That is a trade-off. Software, we're almost done. Your growing medium, aka your soil. Again, these techniques I'm going to be teaching you over the course of the next couple of weeks are going to be all organic soil growing. The reason I put that in quotes is because the soil that you buy, your potting soil, is not soil. It's actually a peat-based blend. It's peat moss, which is just like a substrate that they harvest from bogs in northern regions. It's very good for very quick root development. So peat's great, there's nothing wrong with it. It's not super sustainable, but a lot of these potting soils are switching over to coconut fiber, coco coir. But it's a grow medium that simulates soil, but it's not soil. Finding the right soil or building your own soil is, this is something that people will, kill each other on like message boards and podcasts and stuff over what soil is the best. Frankly, pretty much any soil you buy at a grow shop is going to be good. I don't recommend buying everything from the grow store. And by the grow store, I mean like they usually call them hydro stores, but they're not just hydroponics. In fact, my grow store is called Capital City Organics. I highly recommend it. They have an emphasis on organic growing. They have all the latest stuff. The guys are super cool. They'll do wholesale prices on things if you need a lot of something. And they have an emphasis on sustainability for their sourcing. So Capital City Organics is a great store. Anything you buy in a place like that's going to be awesome. Like for the most part, like some soils are better than others, but if you buy it in a grow store and it's for growing cannabis, then that's the right one. My recommendation is Roots Organic Original. It's just like a affordable organic soil that comes pre-amended. So you can actually grow your whole plant start to finish in that soil without adding nutrients. Like the plant will be fine. Nutrients boost it and optimize certain growth processes, but there's certainly this soil really does have a strong nutrient load, so you don't need to be adding it, but it doesn't have too much. There's some soils that are too rich, so they won't it won't burn your plants, it won't overfeed them, so to speak. So you're going to need some soil. Start by looking at the size of space you have. Buy a tent that fits in that space. I wouldn't go any bigger than a 4x4 or 5x5. The name of the soil is called Roots Organic Original. Another brand of soil that people like is called Fox Farm Ocean Forest. So Roots Organic Original, Fox Farm Ocean Forest are the two soil brands that people generally like. You would use that soil for growing outdoors as well. Same thing, fabric pot, fill it up with this soil out of the bag, put your seed, put your started plant in there and just watch it fly. I mean, the outdoor really, it's really a lot easier. Amendments. So amendments, particularly in the context of organic growing, are usually dry, powdered products that you would mix into your soil in order to boost its fertility. So you're amending the soil. You would do this process. There's a few different ways. One way is to mix it in to your soil before you put the plant in, as like a way of like putting it in like supercharged soil. If you amend your soil with these products, you will need less liquid nutrients later on. So amending soil is great. The important thing with amendments to realize is you can get raw amendments like fish meal, bone meal, blood meal, oyster shell flour, lime, rock phosphate. These are all amendments that you would put in soil. If you amend a soil with these things, you're going to have to blend them yourself, like, because they're raw and separate. They're different things with different percentages of plant available nutrients. You're going to have to figure out a recipe, basically. And there's a lot of recipes online for using these individual amendments to blend into your soil to make it more nutritious for the plant. The easier way is to go to the grocery store and buy Roots Organic Uprising, which is a pre-blended amendment product that saves you probably a lot of math and headache. And it's just a way to get your soil even more nutrient dense without having to guess or risk putting too much of one thing or too little of one thing. So Roots Organic has a ton of pre-mixed amendment products that are great. You can mix this into the soil in advance, or you can top dress it on top of the soil while you're growing. If you do top dress, it's very important to mulch on top of that, because if you have exposed like super nutrient rich amendments, you're going to you might experience some mold or insect development on that stuff. The Roots Organic Uprising would be used in concert with Roots Organic soil. So you would have the soil, and then you would blend in the recommended amount of Roots Organic Uprising in order to boost the fertility of that soil. But you don't have to. It's just like extra stuff to provide more nutrition. So it's very, it's pretty. Oops. Computer is dying. But that actually works because I'm going to switch over to my phone, Josh, in a minute, because I want to take people to see some actual stuff. So these amendments are great. If you grow the plant in the ground, which is like awesome, like definitely if you have the opportunity, if you do a soil test and make sure that there's no lead or harmful heavy metals in your soil, I definitely recommend growing into the ground if possible. You can amend with compost. And we'll talk more about it when we actually get into growing. But if you're able to put one of these amendment blends and some compost into a bed, like an outdoor in-ground bed, that would be awesome. The plants would love you forever. The other thing you want to look at is the Master Gardener Soil Check. UDC tests your soil for free. That's technically our agricultural extension. So I send my in-ground cannabis beds, I send my soil to Dr. Dexisa at UDC, and he always responds and always tells me your soil's great. So so definitely look at UDC soil testing. I don't know if it's free or if it's like $10. It's like really cheap. Nutrients are usually either bottled or micronized powdered products that you mix into the water, and you feed your plants by watering them. Amendments get mixed into the soil, and the plant just chews on them in the soil when it gets watered. Nutrients are what you mix into the water and to feed the roots directly. When you would call it a soil drench, when you're feeding your plants, that means you're mixing some nutrients into your water and you're feeding them. So amendments is soil or top dress, mixed in or top dress. Nutrients goes in the water. There are a lot of different, there's like there's like probably like a million different nutrient lines out there. There's like so many nutrient lines. The most important thing that I recommend for this class is, especially as a beginner, go to the grow shop, look at something that's, cannabis specific, because they're usually formulated for cannabis, and look for a little label that says OMRI, OMRI. If it's OMRI listed, that means it's a product that's approved for organic agriculture. That means that it's 100% derived from biology. It means it's safe. It's usually not going to burn your plants. It's not going to be harmful to you if you touch your face. It's not going to be harmful to the microbes and animals in your soil. If you're outside, it's not going to harm the ecosystem or, affect our watershed through runoff. So if it says OMRI, OMRI listed, OMRI, that means it is certified organic. Another thing you can look for is CDFA. Some products have a California organic certification instead. It's the same thing. So OMRI or CDFA. I'm putting them in here. Again, Roots Organic has a great line of nutrients. I promise you, they didn't pay me to say this. I'm just saying it's a company that's really reputable. I've had a ton of success with them over the years. It's not the most like super fancy professional one, but for a beginner, it says Roots Organic. It's probably I, for nutrients, and we'll go more into this on the next one. You're going to buy nutrients for the vegetative stage, and you're going to buy nutrients for the flowering stage. And they're going to be two different formulations. So at the very least, you should probably have walk out of the building with two bottles. One bottle that is for veg, call it vegetative stage, and one bottle for a flower, called flower, flowering stage. There's also microbial inputs. The best, easiest, cheapest, most excellent, sustainable way to get beneficial microbes into your grow is to use compost. I encourage everybody to make their own compost. You can either make a pile in your backyard. You can order a worm bin, which is or a tumbler. I have a stacking system. So, compost your own food and reduce the waste you're sending to the landfill. So making your own compost is awesome. If you can't make your own compost, you can buy compost. There's Josh is probably 90% of questions that Josh gets are probably where do I get good compost? So it's he's probably the compost expert. For cannabis growing inside, I recommend vermicompost because it has it's the least likely to have any major imbalances. Vermicompost means worm poop. Vermicompost is good because it's pretty inert, it's not smelly. If you're getting worm compost in a bag at the Home Depot or grocery store or something, it means it's pretty well, I don't know about Home Depot, but usually it means it's pretty microbial active. Regular compost, there's a big range in quality. There's some stuff like Leaf Grow, which is our municipal compost, which is super cheap. I wonder how microbially diverse it is, because I just see those bags sitting out in the hot sun for ever. So yeah, vermicompost, worm compost is definitely the safest route. Other inputs, we're going to talk about some other inputs later on. Aside from nutrients and microbial inputs, there's some things that you might want to supplement to make your plants, stronger, more resilient, healthier in different ways. Number one is calcium, CalMag, which is a blend of calcium and magnesium. CalMag, these are two secondary nutrients, so not phosphorus, nitrogen, or potassium. These are two secondary nutrients that the cannabis plant is very uniquely hungry for. So sometimes when you see a deficiency in your plant, it's very likely that it's calcium and or magnesium, and CalMag will correct it. Other inputs that I think are really useful are silica. Silica is my favorite like dark horse plant element because it's very abundant. It's one of the most abundant elements in the Earth's crust, but it's very deficient in these potting soils because these potting soils are not made from the Earth's crust. They're made from like chopped up peat moss and plant matter. So it's something that in a soilless medium, potting soil, that can be deficient sometimes. Silica increases plant resilience and resistance to pest and disease, resilience to changes in temperature and humidity. By the way, Josh, if my computer dies, I'm alive. I'm going to come in on my phone because I think it's about to happen. Silica is awesome. It also raises the pH of your water. So if you buy silica, a product that's well known, it's called Protect, potassium silicate. If you buy silica and you add it to your water, make sure that you are testing the pH and bringing it back down. Some other a lot of nutrients will lower the pH naturally, so you might be okay, but pH meter is a very easy and worthwhile investment for your grow. I have a $300 pH meter that's like really fancy and really accurate because I need it. But the home grower, there are pH meters available online for, $20, $30. I would say, read some reviews online at pH meters. Maybe don't get the cheapest one, but you could probably get a pretty cheap one. Seeds. This is actually my last slide, and then I will switch to my phone and take you up to see a plant. Navigating seed banks. There's a lot of seed banks out there. They have varying degrees of reputability. And then also some seed banks are based in different countries, so it can make payments, processing, and shipping complicated. So I definitely, for that reason, I recommend, going with American seed banks, just because, you can pay in US dollars. It's easier, it ships faster. My favorite seed bank, and the only one I'm really going to recommend to you today, is the DC Seed Exchange. It is local, based in Washington, DC. It's a guy who has a lot of relationships with breeders. It's just like one dude. It ships, like you place your order and you get your seeds in like a matter of days. Other seed banks, especially seed banks abroad, even if they're featuring seeds that are, very reputable or from good breeders, there can be a lot of problems with international shipping. So for that reason, I recommend DC Seed Exchange and just supporting the local growers and breeders. And then DC Seed Exchange does carry seeds from breeders that are recognized nationally. So it's not just that you're going to get DC bred seeds, which, some of them are better than others. There are a few breeders that have been widely recognized as, people who produce very high quality seeds, meaning seeds that produce plants that smell great, potent, resistant to pests and disease, stable as far as their sex. Like they don't have male and female flowers in the same place. Like it'll just be a male or just be a female. They won't be intersex plants. So, some reputable breeders out there. Are all available on the DC Seed Exchange. I think I might actually navigate to their website just to show you the process. Because of like weird legal stuff, depending on literally it's like week to week or month to month, like they might have different payment options. There was a time when you had to send cash or send a money order. Now I think you can pay on PayPal, but then PayPal dropped them at some point. So then it went over to Venmo, and then, you can always pay in Bitcoin, of course. And, so it depends on the sort of the day of the week. But, payment can be sometimes complicated. I think these days they do take most major credit cards. Things have just changed a lot and they're a lot better. So I believe now on DCC Exchange, you can pay via credit card. Another very reputable seed bank is called Rocket Seeds. They have like a huge, humongous selection, including like a lot of the latest and greatest, as well as like classic seeds. And the other one I'll recommend to you is Hembra, Hembra. It's a women-run seed bank, and they have really close relationships with some of the top breeders in the country. So you can get like really high quality strains from Hembra genetics as well. So I'm going to drop these into the chat here, so you can take a look. Selecting strains. Different strains have different flavors, different smells, different phenotypes, like they look different, different morphological features. So like the plant structure itself. The cannabis plant is extremely diverse. There are some plants that only grow 2 feet tall, and there's other plants that I had a plant last summer that grew about 11 feet tall. So not inside, outside, but is huge variability. So it's very important when you're choosing strains to select, when you're choosing seeds, to select strains that fit your goals and fit your environment and fit your space. Most indoor growers prefer sativa, indica or hybrid strains. So indica is a variety of cannabis that originates in the Himalayan highlands and the mountains and the highlands in Nepal and Hindu Kush mountains. These plants are small and short and stocky and very resinous, like very sticky and gooey and potent. So they work very well in California because of the mountains where they grow them there. And then, of course, they were bred to work for indoor growing environments as well because they're short and compact and potent. So they made a lot of sense for people who are growing commercially and people who are growing at home, because off of one little plant, you can get a lot of weed and it'll be pretty strong. So indicas or indica dominant hybrids are generally recommended for an indoor grow where space is limited, which is most people in DC. You can grow sativas, which are plants that originate from more equatorial and tropical regions. Sativas are very generally tall, have narrow leaves. Their flowers are looser and more spread out. So, they don't look as pretty. They produce more of like a euphoric, uplifting, at times trippy high, versus the indicas that are known to produce a more sedative, relaxed, munchy, stoned high. The sativa plants, it's possible to grow them inside. At this point, most plants have been hybridized with indicas. So even things that say they're sativa, they're hybridized. So, they will cooperate if you train them properly. So we're going to talk about plant training next week. If you train your sativa plants or sativa dominant hybrids properly, you should have no problem growing them. Just know they're going to take a little longer to finish. The buds are going to be a little looser, and the plants are going to be a little more unwieldy. Like they're going to want to grow into the light, and you'll run out of vertical space if you don't train properly. So definitely for beginners, I would recommend indica or indica dominant hybrid. Those are also the varieties that are most favored by commercial growers, and that's why most weed that you see these days on the street, your friend brings it, or you buy it from the plug, or you get it at the dispensary, whatever. Most of that stuff is going to be indica because they're easier to grow, and they're more profitable to grow because they flower more quickly, so people can fit more grow cycles into 1 year. Another major choice you're going to have to make are auto flowers versus photoperiods. Photoperiods are your regular cannabis seeds. They're going to be, the strains that you recognize immediately, that you know and love. And the difference between them is the autoflowers will flower without you changing the light cycle. So when we talk next week about the life cycle of the plant, I'll go into more detail, but photoperiod plants, which is like 99% of the plants out there right now, are plants that grow in the vegetative stage when they have more than 12 hours for light. So let's say 18 hours of light, they'll grow leaves and stems. And if they get 18 hours of light, they will grow like that forever. They will never flower. You can grow it, and they'll just get bigger and bigger and bigger, and never flower. When you switch the light cycle to 12 hours on, 12 hours off, once they start to get 12 hours of uninterrupted darkness, that will trigger them to flower. They will start flowering for 8 to 10 weeks, and then they will fully ripen, and that's when you harvest. If you don't harvest them, they're going to die anyway. Like, they won't just stay like that. Like, that'll be the end of their life cycle. So once they flower, they are now on a ticking time bomb, and they're going to mature, and then they're going to die, and there's nothing you can do about it, basically. Autoflowers, they flower regardless of the light cycle. So they can be under 24 hours of light a day. It doesn't matter. They don't need 12 hours of uninterrupted darkness. They don't need any darkness at all. They will grow vegetatively, and then at a certain point, they will switch to flower, and they will continue to flower throughout the rest of their life cycle. People like these plants because they finish a lot faster, because they vegetate and flower at the same time, sort of. You can have a plant that's done in 90 days. People usually use autoflowers for indoors for small grows. Like if you have tight space, or you don't have a space that's light tight, or you want to get your harvest done as soon as you can, autoflowers are a good choice because, you can be start to finish in 90 days. I mean, 3 months versus a photo period would be 4 or 5. So they grow a lot faster. They generally stay a lot smaller. Like they're very like stocky, and it's like more flower for less stem. They're not as generally not regarded as potent or as tasty as photoperiods. They still kind of have a bad name. Like it's still kind of, people kind of talk about it as if it's like kind of a beginner thing, or like using training wheels. But I've grown autoflowers and like had some great flower come off of them. And I do think they're the future, because photoperiodism has a lot of issues, especially from a production standpoint. So I think generally probably the industry is going to be moving more toward autoflowers, especially as climate change comes in, and you're going to want to be able to get your harvests done as soon as possible. So I think autoflowers are the future, but they're also the present. Autoflowers are readily available at these seed banks that I mentioned earlier, and they are a good option to consider if you want a quicker harvest, and if you're tight on space. Otherwise, I'd say go with the photo period, because I think you might like your results better. I think the finished product of the photo period, there is a very notable difference at the end of the day. So that's what I would recommend. Clones, the last thing I wanted to talk about. You don't have to start from seed always. If you have a friend that has a plant that's in the vegetative state, you can clone that plant, and it's not too hard. You can take a cutting of one of the branches. You put it in it can be as simple as putting it in a glass of water, like a vase, basically. It'll grow roots. Or you can put it in a peat plug, which is what I do. It'll keep it hydrated, and it'll grow roots, and you can plant that, and it's a whole new plant. And look at you just saved 2 weeks, because it's already 5 inches tall. So you already have a plant that's ready to go. Clones are great. The problem with clones, there are many, but the main one is that a clone can carry pest or disease from one grow to another. If you start with seeds, you're starting really clean. You start with a clone. If that person had any kind of pest, disease, fungus, pathogen, mite, anything, that's now your problem. So clones are a double-edged sword. You would really want to make sure make sure it's a strong, make sure it's a really good grower and a very healthy grow that you're getting your clones from. And then the final step, oh, this is my last slide. And then I'm going to talk about pinching meristems. And actually, we're going to do like a more full questions section before 8 o'clock. But the last thing is germination. So you've gone to the DC Seed Exchange, you've done your research, you've selected strains that you like based on the flavor profile, based on their size and yield, which is all described on the seed bank's website. You have your grow environment set up, you have your tent, you have your light, you have your fans, and you're ready to get started. The first step is germination. You can germinate your plants directly in the soil. Like you can fill up a small pot. You want to start small and then transplant bigger. Like it'd be a solo cup, for example, with holes punched in the bottom, or a very small pot. And you can moisten the soil evenly and bury your seed in there a 1/4 inch down and cover it up. And then with a spray bottle, mist the surface of the soil to keep it moist until the soil germinates. It's the most simple way. Another thing people do is they will put the seeds between 2 wet paper towels and just make sure the paper towel stays moist and put it in a warm place, like on top of the fridge between 2 plates, until the little tap roots come out of the seeds, and then they'll plant those in the soil and cover it up until it pops up. My preferred method is to use a seedling tray. So has a bunch of little cells. I'll actually switch to my phone and show you. And I use peat plugs. They're like these little spongy cubes that are specially formulated for germinating basically cannabis seeds. I mean, you can probably germinate other stuff in there, but that's really what they're for. Those plugs offer a really good air to water ratio. So the roots grow really fast, and then you can just pick up the plug. You don't have to like shake it out of the cell or, dig in there with your finger. You just like pick it up and it's like already like one spongy little thing with the roots sticking out, and plant that in your solo cup. But truly the solo cup is the best way to start a plant. I'm going to switch to my phone now. And show you some germination going on.
With the
My
grow
bad,
lights.
people. So yeah, here's an exhaust fan. Like you would hook it up to, this is the window here. So it would just go out the window. It would be connected to some ducting. So you would tape that on there, and it would be like your exhaust system. Some other cool stuff, these lights. These are full spectrum lights. See, they're white. So plants prefer this type of light. This light is really cool because it has a dimmer on it. So right now it's really low, but you can crank it up like really high. So right now we have it on low intensity because this plant is in vegetative stage. It doesn't require that much light. Once the plant starts flowering, it's going to require a lot of light in order to produce potent flowers. This plant is called a mother plant. So this is definitely not how a plant would look like in a grow. This plant is actually about 5 years old, and she's just been cloned over and over again. What a grower, what more experienced growers will do is you don't start from seed every time. You pop like 100 seeds. You find the one plant that you really like the plant that was the most resistant to pest and disease, the plant that was most potent, finished the soonest, had all the traits you wanted, and then you clone it, and that's your mother plant. So that from now on, every plant you grow is the best plant out of that 100 plants. It's called the phenotype. So while all those seeds are brother and sister, you're going to pick like the best sibling, because some are way better than others. And you'll notice that when you get a seed pack, even if it's from a good breeder, you're going to have some seeds that produce really awesome plants and some seeds that produce like kind of runts or not as good plants. So the strategy for the commercial grower is to hold on to that good plant and treasure it and prize it and grow it over and over and over again. So this is my mother plant. So I'm going to clone her, and a plant this size, a mother plant this size, will produce about 25 clones. So if I were to chop this whole plant up, it would give me 25 plants, which for legal reasons, I'm not allowed to say whether I will or won't do for the outdoor season. But, you know, if someone wanted to have a bunch of plants that performed really well year after year, they would have a mother plant and clone her. So yeah, you just make like a little cut here, put it in a peat cube, and it would become a clone. And that clone would be genetically, phenotypically, completely identical to this plant. And I know this plant is bomb, so why would I pop any seeds when I know I have a plant that's already bomb, you know? Another thing I have in this room is my oscillating fans. These are called hurricane fans. They're pretty, oh, it's not plugged in. Hurricane fans are good. Disregard the fact that I have to clean these blades. Please don't judge me. I'm like between cycles right now, but these fans oscillate back and forth and they mix the air up in the room. And some seeds here. I'll show you what seeds will look like when you order them from DC Seed Exchange. 2020 is a great seed company. I met them at a Cannabis Cup in Washington State. For autoflowers, the Mandalorian Genetics, he's now named Gnome Automatics because of a copyright dispute with Disney. His seeds come in like with a waxed seal in a box. Like his shit is super exclusive. And these are autoflowers. So this is like the cutting edge autoflowers. So definitely don't diss autoflowers. Mycophyte is a great one. Firebuds. Look at some of these seeds. I paid $200 for these seeds. You know, to stay on top of like the latest strains and stuff, you got to spend money. You know, I love these ones. I love these ones. These ones are known for being fast finishers. So that's why I selected them, because they were bred in the Pacific Northwest, which they have very, very heavy rains in the late summer and early fall. So just like us. So their plants are bred for that adaptation. And yes, the gift, I got you. If I ever see you in real life, I got you. So yeah, I mean, pH meter, surge protector. For the little plugs I used to clone, they're called Root Riot. These are great for starting seeds and for making clones. So anyway, I know we're like super at the end of time, but if anyone has any questions, please let me know. You can also get my email from Josh and email me questions. And then I promise I will be like way more brief next time and leave like the second hour for questions, which is my original plan for this time.
No worries, man. This has been great. Listening to the information. Can you do the tour on the lights and the seedlings real quick? That one was muted. You had a
the lights.
Yeah.
And those were not cannabis seedlings, to be clear. That was like broccoli rab and like kale, because I have a big vegetable garden as well. Any questions in the meantime? This is the light I use for my seedlings, and then these are the trays. These are the trays that you put the peat plugs in. These are my seedling trays. This is the light that I use for my seedlings. This is an example. This is called the blurple. You know, this is an example when I was telling you I don't recommend lights that look like this. So that's why I showed you that, because it's full spectrum blurple. Okay, going through some questions. What strain are you growing? That is a lime OG. That's just like a very dependable plant that I've just been growing for years, and you know, just has really kind of predictable, reproducible results. Smells great, tastes great. everybody likes it, so I just keep growing it. And peat over coconut coir. So peat is peat is not sustainable. That's the problem with peat. You know, it's really good for horticulture, but I just did my research on it, and it got pretty hard to justify using it. So I try to use as many coconut coir based products as possible. That being said, those little Root Riot plugs, Root Riot or Rapid Rooter, they're all made out of peat, and it's just like such a small amount of them that I kind of justify it. The other thing is, you know, these bagged soils you're going to be buying, they are reducing the amount of peat in them. They used to be like all like really peat heavy. Now they're mixing in cocoa coir and recycled forest products, which basically just means like basically like wood pulp, like fines. Peat moss is so this is, you know, it's like, you know what, peat, thank you so much for all the love, everybody. I appreciate that. Peat moss is like what you call soil, like this is peat moss. It's a potting, it's what potting soil is made out of. It's not actually soil. It's organic matter that's harvested from these big bogs in like Canada and Europe. And it's really popular in horticulture because plants like love to grow in it, but it's not actually soil. Soil is sand, silt, and clay, and with some organic matter mixed in. This is just 100% kind of like an inert organic matter that is really porous. So that's what's used in potting soils, including cannabis potting soils. A lot of cannabis potting soils now are substituting coco coir for peat. Coco coir is basically a processed coconut husk. So it's the same, almost the same consistency, same color, it looks the same. It's just made out of coconut husks rather than peat moss. It's just a different material. So, you know, you can't grow in straight peat or straight coconut coir. It's usually like part of a potting mix. I use heating pads. You can use heating pads for germinating seeds. It makes them germinate faster. Clones really like heating pads, but it's not necessary, you know, unless your room is cold for some reason. So yeah, heating pads are good. The problem with heating pads also is there's a margin for error there, where like if you're using heating pads and for some reason you're like a little bit behind on watering, or you forget to water and you go out, the heating pads can kind of fuck you up. So I'm a very lazy gardener. I just always advocate for whatever is easiest, whatever has the least amount of risk, and that's definitely what I'll be teaching you here. So for that reason, I probably won't be recommending people go out and buy heating pads, especially if they're just germinating a few seeds. Oh, thank you so much for everybody. And I totally, you know, I'm going to do my best to get to the questions, but I know people got to leave. Soil, yeah, Roots Organics, original is good. The smallest tent out there that works. I mean, like I would recommend like a 2x4. I'd say a 2x4 is like a really good beginner tent that doesn't take up too much space. I think you can get 2x2. You know, that's like a one plant tent right there, though. That's like, yeah, maybe like one or like two tiny plants. So maybe you can get a 2x2, but I don't think it gets any smaller than that. I'm sure there's tents of all sizes, but a 2x4 is a good beginner. 3x3, and then a 4x4 is like you can really grow some weight with a 4x4. You can grow a pound in a 4x4 actually, but you know, not everyone does, but yeah. Josh, the shortest sativa strain I know. So sativas will be the original sativas are the Oaxaca, Panama Red, the Colombian Gold, like all the classic stuff that you hear about, like Cheech and Chong. Those are all sativas because, you know, for especially in the early days of cannabis culture in the U.S., cannabis was imported. So it wasn't grown here. It was imported from, drug producing regions like, Mexico and Colombia. So all that stuff was sativas because it was all tropical regions. Thai is sativa. Congo, all the African varieties are like Durban poison. Those are all sativas. So those are called landrace sativas, meaning they're heirlooms. And people say, oh, those are just the, naturalized, they kind of dismiss them a little bit, like, oh, those are the just original regional strains and stuff. But I'm like, actually, those are indigenous farmers from all across the world making decisions and breeding for thousands of years. So calling them land races just kind of reduces them. I think them more as heirlooms that indigenous people bred over many years. So so a lot of the original heirlooms are sativas, but those, of course, they're growing like, they're like bamboo. Like they're like these giant, like in Jamaica, like if you've ever seen the cannabis fields in Jamaica, like they're these like epically tall, like lanky sativas. So you would never want to grow like a pure sativa in a tent, or even outside here, to be honest. I have a friend who actually brought some stuff back from Kenya, and he grew it outside, and it was awesome. They were like, they must have been like at least 15 feet tall. Like it was so impressive. But the sativas that you're going to find at a seed bank like Hembra or DC Seed Exchange are mostly going to be hybridized, and they're going to be selected for like cerebral sativa mental effects, even if they're not like sativa proper plants. The best ones are Jack Herrera is like a sativa hybrid that'll have sativa effects, but it's very manageable to grow Jack Herrera in a indoor setting. Jack Herrera the strain is named after the author Jack Herrera, who wrote the book The Emperor Wears No Clothes, which was this big just takedown of cannabis and hemp prohibition that really paved the way for the legalization and normalization of hemp and cannabis. And he wrote this in like the 1970s. So he had a strain named after him. He's kind of widely respected among a lot of cannabis activists. And so Jack Herrera is a great strain. Haze can be very lanky and hard to grow, but there are some hybridized hazes that are workable in an indoor setting. So those will be, some Chemdog is another popular sativa dominant hybrid that has been grown indoors for many years. Chemdog is also awesome because it has such a unique smell and character, and very, very popular as well. So yeah, Jack Herrera, Haze, and Chemdog are sativa dominant hybrids that are manageable in an indoor setting with proper training. But a pure like heirloom or landrace sativa is going to be pretty much impossible inside.
Like even with like pruning or training is still too much for heirloom.
So the original so I've seen it done. It's been done. The problem with the sativa, growing a sativa inside, is that they get the way they're structured, and it's easier to describe if you have one in front. It's obvious once you see it, but like they're very much like bud here, stem, bud here, stem, bud here, stem, bud here. Whereas the indicas stack buds on top of each other, like it's bud, 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 bud. It's like actually a big like stick. And most hybridized varieties are like that now too. Some are more spread than others, but for the most part, like those are called colas. They call them colas, which is like a stick of bud. And that's just one flower stacking on top of another. The sativa definitely resists that. So it's very hard to, yes, exactly like Brussels sprouts. It's like sativas are Brussels sprouts and indicas are like broccolis. That's the best way to describe it. Now, again, it's all been hybridized, so everything is broccoli kind of, but the really old, like classic heirlooms, they will not stack. And what will happen is the buds on the top, the tippy top, will get a lot of light. So those little buds will be great. But then because there's so much stem and buds like so far down the plant, those will get very little light. And outside, the sun like swoops around, so all the buds get light. But in a static light environment, only the top ones will get light. So it just causes a lot of problems. First of all, most of your buds are going to be fluffy and shitty. And then second of all, if the top bud is getting all the light and it's doing great, it's going to get really heavy, and it's going to weigh down that big lanky stem. So yeah, but it's possible. It'd be fun if anyone could do it, Josh. It would be you. So I think you should try. I have some sativas, so yeah, I'll drop some seeds off for you. We can try it. But I think sativas might I've grown some pretty cool sativas outside here because it gets so like humid and swampy, and actually that bud structure of them being all spaced out is good for the mid-Atlantic summer because of all that rain we get. The buds are airier, so they don't get bogged down by rain, so they don't mold as much. Like dense indicas will mold. So outside in this region, a sativa is actually awesome and does really well. Question about about side lighting. Shelf grower, kitchen garden for years. I don't know if you're referring to growing cannabis on a shelf, but the side lighting is never made sense commercially, or from a production standpoint. It would totally work from a like an experimental perspective. You could do it if you wanted to. It's just a lot easier to have a strong light on top that you can raise and lower based on the growth of the plant, and you prune and train the plant to maximize that footprint. In a tent grow, if you're in a limited space, the sides are going to be very limiting. Like you almost, in a tent, if you're doing it right, you're almost always growing into the side of the tent. And whenever the plant touches the side of the tent, like that's really it. Like you really have to, once the plant hits the side wall, like you're out of space. So if you wanted to side light inside of a tent, you'd be reducing your footprint like a lot. Maybe you could argue that you would get more yield off of a lower footprint because there's more light hitting different parts of the plant. It's possible, but it's definitely a lot easier to just have a top light and train accordingly. Cannabis is also, I want to say, not something you can grow on a windowsill. Totally not going to happen. It's been tried many times. Everyone thinks it's going to work. And if it works, like, please, I hope it works. Like, tell me. But it always just, it almost never works. A few reasons it won't work in a windowsill. They really do need a lot of light. I mean, unless it's like a huge bay window or like a sliding door that gets like a ton of direct light all day, it's not going to have enough light in the windowsill. And then you also can't control the photo period. So it'll never flower. Like you put it in the windowsill, that's fine. Even in the winter, the problem is in the winter when it should be flowering, it's going to be getting ambient light from street lights and from your house, and it'll stay in veg, and then it'll be like, oh shit, I got a flower, and then it'll try to flower and it'll be shitty, and then it'll like go back. And yeah, the windowsill never really works.
Awesome.
Yeah.
This was an amazing class. Thank you so much. Does anyone else have any last questions before we wrap it up?